Yesterday, I heard a fun quote online, and it said, "We want a seat at the table because otherwise, you want a seat at the table because otherwise you're on the menu." American politician Shirley Chisholm, maybe I pronounced it wrong, first said, "If you don't have a seat at the table, bring your folding chair." But in reality, we want a bigger table, a new table. This panel explores the elephant in the room when it comes to fashion, diversity, and the current system designed around exploitation for both labor and resources. How can sustainable fashion as a culture effectively lead positive change across the industry? So I would like to invite my panelists, and each of them will take time to introduce themselves in their own words. Please help me welcome Alan Solway, Corina Emmerich, and Aja Barber to the stage. Thank you. No, wrong. Sophia Lee, I'm so sorry. Wrong. Sophia Lee, Aja Barber, and Alan Solway, please come to the stage. So Alan, you want to start? You have a microphone?
Yes.
Okay.
Is it on?
He'll switch it on.
Oh, okay. Yat ishe Alan Sawi and she not dot net touching in Schle, Ket Clive, Bashachin, Twitter teaching us to Oglala Lakota Dashanale. Hello everyone, my name is Alan Sawe. I am Navajo, Tohono and Oglala Lakota. I'm 21 years old. I'm a writer, community organizer, as well as an ambassador for Dig Deep, which is a nonprofit that helps bring running water and electricity to the Navajo Nation, where I'm from. And on the Navajo reservation where I grew up, currently still, there's like no cell phone service, no paved roads, no running water, no electricity, and we just, sorry, I'm like having a pause, but there's all these issues on the reservation that currently like America itself doesn't even acknowledge, and that continuously is ignored by everyone who is in a position of power. And even though we don't have like basic modern necessities back home, within our own community, we view wealth as like connection to the land and to the community and language, and realizing and knowing that indigenous languages are the heart of any culture, and it's important to keep that alive because these languages were created as the earth was created. And so it helps us learn about the earth. So the more we lose these languages, the more knowledge we lose about the earth, that those languages were created on themselves. And so speaking in terms of sustainability, on the reservation, it's not a choice. You have to survive, and you have to sustain yourself and your family, and even that is a luxury back home, because again, like many of us don't have running water or electricity. And just growing up this way, learning, how the government and colonialism has affected my whole life up until now, and even still does every day. It's like something brand new is coming up to oppress all of us in some way. And just indigenous livelihood on the reservation is sustainable, and we have to make it sustainable because that's how we've had to survive and adapt over the course of the past 500 years. And one thing that I want to also acknowledge is that how corrupt and evil capitalism is in multiple forms. And I feel like I experience something new with that every day as well. And we all live under this colonial capitalist rule that basically makes us exploit ourselves in a variety of ways. And for me, what I see as sustainability in the future is seeing every company, not just the fashion industry itself, directly working with indigenous people, because they're also being exploited to make the clothes that you're all wearing. And they are the ones taking their resources and their time to put what you buy on the shelves. And if we simply took that step to work with indigenous people from all around the world, I think that would make positive, progressive change. And to also know that, like, even though the world is what it is right now, it's not, completely our fault, but healing is definitely all of our responsibility to ensure that we have a planet for future generations. And let me see. And I think it's also important to acknowledge the fact that the system that we're currently all operating under isn't at all broken, because it's clearly working for the 2,200 billionaires and white men who run and own everything. And we also need to just take our time with how we work together as individuals and communities and start building our communities, as well as being, inclusive and mean every word that we say. And I think that's it for you.
Thank you. No, it's okay. We'll have more time to explore more in depth what you just said. Sophia or Ajay?
Sure, I can go. I have a loud voice, so can I do a quick exercise with everyone? Yes. Is that cool? Okay, sorry, I'm like an energy person, and one of those things you're gonna be like, oh, weird. We're just gonna do like a quick 3-breath kind of meditation to center the energy, because it's Saturday, like, let's have some fun, right? Yes. I know we're talking about sustainability and saving the world, but so if everyone can close their eyes and make sure both of your feet are firmly on the ground. Don't worry, this is gonna be super quick. And put your palms facing up on your legs if you want to be receiving energy, and put your palms facing down if you want to feel more grounded. Okay, cool. Now we're gonna take a deep breath in through our nose and hold it for 4 counts here, and then let it out with an audible sigh. Yeah, that feels good. We're gonna do that 2 more times. Breathe in again through your nose, hold it for 4 counts, and let it out even louder. Ooh, we got a lot to let out. Okay, last time. Breathe in through your nose. We're gonna let it out really loud this time. Go for it. Okay, amazing. Keep your eyes closed. We're gonna do one more thing, because I did this the other night and I realized how impactful it was. Close your eyes and list out every person that you love in your head in no particular order. You could just list out names. Okay, you can open your eyes. Thanks. Okay, did anyone list themselves as someone they love? No. Did anyone list Mother Nature? Yes? Okay, we got one person who loves Mother Nature at the Sustainability Conference. My whole point is that without loving ourselves and without loving Mother Nature and without actively acknowledging that on a daily basis, it's quite hard to implement what we're trying to do with sustainability into our everyday lives. My name is Sophia. I'm a journalist. I'm a video director. I was the former entertainment media editor at AmericanVogue.com, where I helped basically structure and create the digital voice for AmericanVogue.com. And above all, I consider myself a storyteller, and so much so that in high school, my superlatives were most talkative and loudest. They created loudest for me. And then they had to find a guy that was just as loud, because there was like a female and a guy. But I didn't always have a voice, and above all, I think that we're all storytellers, and not only storytellers to the world. The stories we tell ourselves actually can either be the most impactful or the most harmful. The narrative that we tell ourselves. So basically, I could tell myself that I grew up as a first generation in America. I had immigrant parents, and because that they were both working at the time that I was born, I had to go live with my grandparents in China between the ages of 2 and 4. So when I got back to the States, I didn't know English. It was hard for me to communicate. There are 2 sides to every story. And just as I can tell myself that story, I can also tell myself the story that I was born in the US to immigrant parents, and because they were in the US, I was even able to have this life because China has a one-child policy. So I might not be on the stage if it wasn't for that. Because I was able to live with my grandparents in China, I feel closer to my cultural identity and my heritage, and closer to my grandparents, who my sisters living in the US would never be able to say. And also, because I was not able to communicate as a child during my formative years and communicate English, I can say that I want everyone to have a voice and how important it is to make sure everyone has a voice. So we are either the victim or the hero of our own stories, and I think that narrative that we tell ourselves of our own story is the most important, because we can either say, I'm just one person of 7 billion in the world. I cannot make a change when it comes to sustainability. Or I can tell myself, I am just one person, and my one person with every other one person in this audience and in this world, we can all make a difference and we can all make a change, and we have to do that in 12 years. So that is my story, and I've watched Mulan too many times while younger to accept defeat and failure before we even tried. And I think with sustainability, we can either accept failure already, or we can just keep fighting. And so I hope after this conference, we just continue fighting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We should have done this exercise of breathing before. I was freaking out the first few minutes of this.
Oh my gosh, we can breathe every 5 minutes, if you guys. We're constantly breathing.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Aja, please.
Hi, my name is Aja Barber. I'm a writer, stylist, and consultant. Some people call me an activist, but I don't like to wear that label because that implies that a person is often perfect in their opinion, and that's absolutely impossible. And so I tend to say I'm a writer and a stylist and a consultant. And I try and stay in my lane and focus on what I know. I used to keep all of the things that I was interested in compartmentalized and never shall the two paths cross. But a little while back, I began to realize that all the things that I cared deeply about, race, feminism, privilege, colonization, wealth, inequality, deconstructing white supremacy, fashion, style, representation, actually all of those things intersect. And then I learned about the wonderful work of Kimberly Crenshaw, and it was all over for me. Now, before anyone in this room gets turned off by the phrase white supremacy, let's talk about what that means. White supremacy, as I refer to it, refers to a political and socioeconomic system in which white people have structural advantages over others on a collective and individual level. And often, if you're white, you don't even see it until it's pointed out to you. And that's okay. That's how the system was designed to work. But once it's pointed out to you, then it's time to do something about it. And no one's saying that you put these systems in place. They've been in place for a very long time, and they've been working quite effectively. But what I am saying is you should want to undo those systems if you want us all to have a fair and just future where all of us live a wonderful and happy life on a planet that's healthy. When I look at the things which really bother me about the fashion industry and manufacturing, colonization, all of this ties to white supremacy. If we're talking about fat phobia, if we're talking about colonization, if we're talking about exporting of resources, who's doing the labor, and when the product is finished and done, who has to deal with the product? It all ties back to white supremacy. The fast fashion industry, as we know it, is colonization under a new name. But because we know about wealth inequality, it's important to remember that there's intersections in who can truly have the power in this conversation. Is it the job of the single parent living on or around the poverty line to sort out this mess and quit fast fashion when they have children to dress? I like to think that that responsibility falls on people like me. I'm a middle-class, able-bodied, cisgender woman who sometimes has disposable income. I can make those decisions, and I feel that with power, these sort of decisions happen at a certain level, and hopefully it will create a change, but I would never look at someone who has less privilege than me and say, oh, why are you buying that? That's not fair. So for me, the issues that I see with sustainability movement today is that it's still visibly very white. And sustainability should actually include all of our faces, but especially people of color. I'm seeing movements like homesteading being sort of taken over on Instagram by white faces when indigenous people have taught us everything we know about how to take care of the land. Those should be the people that we are listening to and uplifting, and I'm not seeing those voices uplifted, and I have an issue with that. I find it wholly unacceptable that the visible television face of sustainability in the UK is a white lady who picks fights with people of color because she doesn't understand white saviorism. If you don't understand white saviorism, then you don't understand colonization. And if you don't understand colonization, you don't understand how fast fashion hurts and harms people of color. Why can't the person to make that documentary be someone from the country that's affected by it? Why can't we listen to them? Why does it always have to be a white face sharing a story and a narrative when people of color can do the same thing and we know it? Or maybe someone who doesn't go back to sharing fast fashion on Instagram after they make a documentary. It's a really low bar to clear, people. I have a problem with the idea that brands that say that they're all about sustainability do paid partnership with influencers who side by side do partnerships with companies which were named in the Rana Plaza collapse. I think that tells me something about a brand that says that they're doing the right thing, but is giving money to someone who's promoting the complete opposite thing. We have to be selective in this, and there are people that have been talking the talk and walking the walk, but I'm not seeing their voices be uplifted. And so my work is about uplifting those voices. My message is one of accountability and true diversity, because a collective future for all of us is one that doesn't include white supremacy. And if you want that future, then you should actively fight against it, because it's not good for you either. My message won't always make you comfortable, but it will make you think. And that is why you're here today. So thank you for being here with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. I hear all the time, oh, sustainability, I hate that word, you know, like that means nothing. For me, it's eco-fashion. For me, it's consciousness. I think we need a new set of words that are better adapted to this inclusive way of governing. Words that now are important but seem to have lost their meaning, or the word itself is starting to be overused and lose completely the meaning of it. Starting with sustainability. It is about responsibility, or is it about ethics? Is it about values? Is it about culture? What are we trying to sustain, as I said earlier? Is it about doing just better or good overall? How can we measure it? So my first question is, on this note, how can we redefine sustainability? And perhaps there's a new word that we should be using.
Do I have to go first? Okay. For me, any conversation about sustainability has to include the phrase white supremacy. I use it all the time. Makes people uncomfortable, makes people unhappy, but that's because they're not doing the research to actually realize what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that you're lighting a burning cross on my lawn. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is that we have to look at the systems in place that have harmed and oppressed a lot of people, and we have to start deconstructing that. But the word is something I really struggled with this question to come up with what the right word is. But to me, actions always speak louder than words.
No, definitely. What about you, Sophia? You're the journalist, you know words, you're the wordsmith.
Oh, am I?
Give me a new definition of sustainability.
Well, I actually think that in our society and where we are, we love buzzwords. We just like gravitate towards buzzwords, and buzzwords in itself goes viral. So it's like, you know, like avocado is a buzzword, and then even organic. Like I live in the East Village in New York, and all the bodegas on my block say organic bodega, but they're not actually organic. They just literally put up the word on. I was looking at my shampoo bottle the other day, and it says vegan, cruelty-free, gluten-free. My shampoo is not gluten-free. There's no need for my shampoo to be gluten-free. But these are just all buzzwords, and it's really sad that sustainability has gotten to a point where it's just a buzzword now. every brand is claiming sustainability for themselves. So they'll claim that their brand is sustainable, but we actually don't have the statistics to back that up to put them against the standard saying, oh yes, you do meet the levels of a sustainable fashion brand. So it's a buzzword, but I think it's all encompassing. It's a social justice issue, it's a cultural issue, it's a white supremacy issue. We need a word that encompasses all of it and the education around it to know that there's so many arms to this word. It's not just like thinking that we're being green or clean conscious. And it's also knowing that every action we have as an individual has an impact. So every individual we have as a consumer and someone working in the industry or someone producing a brand or a line, every action we have today and in our lives, it has an impact, and that's sustainability.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Alan, I think you have like a lot more to say about sustainability.
Yes.
Let me know.
So for me, sustainability is all about decolonization because currently, we're not sustaining ourselves at all in any way. Like, for example, I saw an article the other day that came out from a geoscientist at Harvard explaining that his research came to the conclusion that we need to get the world together in 5 years, otherwise we're not going to have anything to live on. So sustainability is definitely like a buzzword, as you were saying, but for me, when I hear it, like sustaining ourselves is the complete opposite of what we're currently under right now. We're not sustaining ourselves in any way. And in order to do that, we need to decolonize, and like every institution that's in power right now needs to take active steps towards decolonization in order for us to be able to sustain ourselves.
Thank you. Which brings me to diversity and inclusion, other words that are cringeworthy sometimes. They're both euphemism, and what we actually mean is everything besides all white men. Now, let's fast forward into the future, and where diversity and inclusion are long-lost concepts of the past, where we have a new table, and we may be made out of recycled old tables, and we have new governance that reflect the actual diversity of our humanities. How did we get there? How did we get to this new table made out of recycled old tables, and where diversity is just the base? It's basically the notion behind decolonization. It's basically the notion behind getting all of us together in the next 5 years, all of the countries together in the next 5 years, in order for us to be able to innovate on that level, on a conscious level, on a global level, on an international level. Anyone wants to take a step at how did we arrive here in this time machine?
Well, for me, my take on it is censoring the most marginalized voices within any community, because at the end of the day, when you include the people who are hurting the most in your community, then you're giving a voice to everyone. And I feel like that's how we can achieve the goal of inclusion and diversity becoming a thing of the past.
Sophia.
I think that when we get to this magical table, it's in our new future, that diversity and inclusion, it will be a time when we won't even basically characterize people as Alan, we don't even have to put those kind of identities on us. It would just, for example, for political candidates, because everyone's announcing their presidential run in the US now, it would be she's a Black American woman from Georgia, or he's a gay man from Texas, and it's there will be a time when we shouldn't even have to put those kinds of identifiers on people because it's just the baseline. They're just a great candidate, or, in general, it doesn't have to be you're X, Y, and Z. And because, so to diversify, it starts by taking away those labels, having that already be part of the foundation in our narrative and our perspective, instead of the preconceived notions we need to put on those labels from the get-go.
Aja, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree with both of what has been said here. And for me, I always tell people, when you walk into a room and you realize that you hold more privilege than someone else in the room, that is, for me, my signifier to be quiet and to listen. When I'm in circles with transgender community, it's not my turn to hold the mic. And I find that I learn so much by not asking questions. Generally, even if I have a question, I realize that if I just hang in there for long enough, that question's going to answer itself. So I think it's about people not taking up as much space. I think it's about power shifts. I think in order to really, get past white supremacy, there has to be a shift in power and sharing of power. And right now we don't have that. And so a power shift, a change in general conscious about how we view these conversations and whether or not it's my turn to speak in a room. And generally, if I'm trying to learn, it's not. So a lot of listening, but I agree with everything that's been said here. Hopefully there will be a future where it's not like Aja's a black activist, and I'm like, I'm not an activist, I'm not perfect.
But activists aren't perfect either, and so me too, I always get labeled with activist. I'm like, I'm a designer. I didn't study activism. But diversity always feels to me like a spice at the end of the dish. You're like, doesn't taste so good. Let me add some spice on it, like some hot sauce in my bag, And, and so I feel like if we want to talk about diversity, I think on a company level, on a company culture level, it needs to be a part of the company culture. It needs to be a part of the values and the ethics of a company at the core of the company. Oftentimes in fashion, and we've seen it so happen online so well with the cancel culture. Just after this panel, we're going to be looking deeper into cancel culture, and it feels like calling brands out or calling brands in, as this new term I'm trying to coin, like, come join us, join the movement. It seems that diversity has been a big issue recently, right? And the response has been, oh my gosh, where are the black people at? Where are the people of color at? Let's get them quickly into our headquarters and let them teach us something. But that feels also a little bit like a spice at the end of the dish, where what we want is to be one of the main ingredients in order for us to fast forward in that future that we're looking for.
And often on top of that, when people of color are quick, come into the organization, people still get ignored. There was a quote from a fashion professional who I can't remember saying, I've been that person in that room when a questionable decision's being made, and I've sort of felt like, do I say something? Is this going to affect my job if I say something? So it goes back down to, is this the ethos of your brand? Sorry, I kind of jumped my place in line there.
No, absolutely. This was for me to just like poke you a bit, because it feels like we're like blah blah blah. Blah, blah.
Is this in the ethos of the company for real? I mean, when Fenty Beauty came out, all of a sudden everyone was like, oh my goodness, we're diverse too. But if you just look at, 3 Instagram posts and then you scroll down and everything's white, that's not true diversity. That's reaction to competition. That's not in the ethos of your company. And so there really needs to be an actual core of diversity that's not lip service or PR or spin. And I'm not seeing a lot of that from bigger companies.
Yeah. And also, to go off that, I completely agree with all of that. When you were saying, come, like, come join at the end, like, you can't expect those people, because they're then the token diversity people, you can't expect the token diversity people to re-educate an entire...
fix everything.
Yeah, to fix everything. So if you're in a meeting room and there's that one token person of color and you expect that person of color to always call out the bullshit that your company's going through, no, like, you need to be an ally for, like, even if you're white, black, purple, pink, whatever, like, you need to be an ally for that person of color.
And when they call you out, are you going to get mad about it?
Exactly,
and be like, well, you just can't do anything right. You're just never happy. So that we really have to think about these attitudes towards people of color, because I've been that person of color in the room, and it's like, well, what do you think? And I'm thinking, well, do you want to hear the truth, or do you want me to tell you what you want to hear?
Absolutely. Alan?
Well, it definitely is like a form of tokenization, and I think that we all have felt that before, for sure. And I honestly was going to say exactly what you said, so now I'm like out of a loss for words. But being in that position of being like tokenized is so like, it's so dehumanizing, and your expected labor, even though you're already suffering on top of that. And then being expected to labor from people who are in higher power than you, it doesn't make sense to me. And that's...
With the arrival of the information age, the internet kind of made every single industry transparent. It kind of like put a spotlight under like a structure, and everything is apparent from within. And we are able to see the true company cultures that exist, whether they are super profit-oriented or very much, goal-oriented, or some of them that are trying to figure themselves out. It feels like without companies wanting, they are somehow subject to this over-transparency where even if they aren't transparent, we kind of see through what's going on. Which gets me to, again, like this question about culture and about company culture and about diversity in relationship to company culture. I was at a recent event at the United Nations for UN Women, and they were also addressing diversity and inclusion, of course, as this is like a big topic everywhere. And they were saying, unless we see women of color and people of color, but specifically women of color, in the C-suite and at a governance level, we're not going to be able to have this diversity we're looking for, because diversity is not just you hire a model of color and you run a super cool campaign, or suddenly you're investing in this community of color for like a documentary and then you check a box and you're like, we did well. It is very much about governance. And so my last question, before maybe we open it up to the public if we have enough time, it would be, how do we govern? Like, we have a seat at the table now. We are in that future. How are we governing as people of color to make those changes?
Well, I would say look at your favorite fast fashion companies and look at the boards. Who is at the top of the board? And I can tell you, for the two biggest ones in the world, there are no people of color. None. Notwithstanding Uniqlo, which is huge, and yeah, but the two biggest ones in the world, no people of color. So how does that trickle down to an actual culture within a company, and who is holding the power? And obviously we know the answer to that question, but I see it in other spaces as well. Very popular Makers website that I enjoy and buy from, because it's great to buy from people. There's so much press out about how diverse this company is, and look at how amazing we are. They allow indigenous headdresses to be sold on that site. That's not true diversity. It isn't. It's not acceptable. And I don't see it as a call out. I see it as doing better. I think the issue is people are afraid of being corrected, and we don't change anything if we don't correct these big companies with power. And that's not a call out. But if you're going to...
It's a call in.
I don't even think it's a call in. It's just facts.
I'm trying to get that word.
Okay, all right. It's just facts.
I'm trying to make
I have an agenda here.
If you're selling indigenous artifacts, things that you shouldn't be selling, and quite frankly, some of that stuff is illegal to actually sell, then you're not practicing what you preach. No matter how many PR pieces there are about your corporate culture and how great it is, that's just not cool, and I'm going to be pointing that out more and more. And it won't be fun, it won't be comfortable, but we need change.
Thank you. Last words?
Selena, I feel like you're like Gretchen from Mean Girls, where it's like, stop trying to make fetch happen. Because you're like, Colin, I'm trying to make Colin happen. Yes, exactly. So you just made me think of something, Asia, where remember when H&M went through all of the
Coolest Monkey in the Jungle?
Yes, Monkey in the Jungle. And what their response was to hire a diversity director. And the thing is that when you hire, is like tokenization, when you hire one person to oversee diversity for a massive corporation, that one person, again, isn't going to fix all your problems. And just because you hire that one person doesn't mean to the public now that, now you're there.
And do you blame them when it doesn't all come together as well?
You're not going to be insensitive or racist anymore. Like, that one person, and just because that role exists, does not mean it's going to change everything. And I read this story recently, and I heard it may or may not be true, but did anyone hear that story about Beyonce walking out of a Reebok meeting? So let's say it was, hypothetically, if it were true.
Just can you say it for those who didn't hear the story, just quickly, like summarize it?
Sure. So Beyonce and Reebok had this very had this meeting for a partnership, and Reebok was going to present this whole line. They've done a lot of work on it. Beyonce goes into the meeting. I'm talking about it like Beyonce's like a friend.
She's
but
your friend.
She told me this personally. No. So anyways, the story goes that Beyonce walks into this meeting and they're going to basically pitch her this entire line that they've done. And she goes, are these the people I'm going to be working with? And one person goes, yes. And she goes, I'm sorry, I don't see anyone in this room that looks like me or represents me. And so she apparently walks out of the meeting. Let's say if that were true, like that in itself
I think it's true.
It's true.
Yes.
That's putting money where your mouth is. That's living out your values.
But once again, it's a person of color who has to be the catalyst for it.
Yes, exactly. And I think I've heard a lot, like you tell me, people have been saying they're so, like during the Me Too movement, all the females were like, I'm so exhausted of educating men. And it's like, people of color, are they like so exhausted of educating white people? Like, like over and over again.
It has a toll on mental health. It has a toll on our bodies. It has a toll on so much. And it's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
It's a big responsibility. And as I was saying my first words in the beginning to kick off the conference, I feel like, breaking the ice was already such a big effort. But I was shaking. Like, I was not like, oh, yeah, no problem, colonialism. I don't care. No, my whole body was shaking. And I was scared because it's not. I've been told my whole life, don't say anything, don't talk, don't say shush, don't say you're Arab, don't say you're this, don't say you're that, because you're gonna lose. And my name is Céline, like I'm not French, and we've been colonized by France and so on. And I see my name and I see what my parents did. I was born in the middle of a war, and so it was like, okay, that's gonna be her passport. Like, we are leaving, and she can't be named Hala or Khalida, like she needs to be named something that can be her first passport. And that's something for me that was a point of shame growing up. I was ashamed of all of it. But now I feel like, you know what? If we put shame and guilt aside, and if we're able to do this, we can achieve so much openness. And as an intellectual conversation, we can reach a level of intellectualism and openness that's so important for us as a whole, as a community, as a culture, to be able to discuss these issues openly, without any stigma, as much as possible, although they come loaded, and to be able to come up with solutions.
I'm sorry you've experienced that. I mean, when I first started talking about white supremacy, it was just on Facebook. So many people, you hate white people, and that couldn't be any farther from the truth.
You're married to one.
I know, yes, indeed. And it does affect us. It does affect our mental health. When I've had a day where a troll has followed me not just from a post, but actually to a live video where I'm talking to people and they're just, going at it. I know I'm visibly agitated. I'm in a bad mood when my partner comes home. It's not great. It's not great for the mental health.
Of course.
But that shame, actually, because when I was growing up, I went to, like, the high school I was going to, I wasn't even considered a minority because there weren't enough Asians to be considered a minority. Like, you had to be a certain percentage. So it was literally because there were 2 Asians in my high school, so I wasn't even a minority. But
that is the definition of minority.
No, it's because, like, in the
they had the quota
school, the quota, it didn't meet the quota. So, but the thing is that shame, like everything that made us different when we were younger and we just like wanted to fit in, that is our greatest asset today is what makes us different. And that shame is actually like my most pride and joy today. And I think that's how we can like
change the narrative, what you were saying in the beginning.
Yeah, and own that shame and be like, and channel it to finally end up at that recycle table.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the recycle table. Okay, I just want to say thank you so much. We're going to open up to questions, but first I want to say thank you to Just Water. You have in your bag Just Water, and I would like to request 1, 2, 3, 4 Just Water to here, because we need water. And if we want to questions? Yes. Wait, microphone? Yes. To the person? Here she. Thank you, babe.
Oh, I was going to pass them down.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this conversation, and I'm really, really pleased to see this panel. I do have a question about tokenism, which has come up a lot, and this idea of change or systemic change and internalized racism. So I feel that the way that tokenism works is the people who make it to this table, which currently is not recycled, have to go through a process of socialization so that by the time they're in these rooms, even if they have some idea or connection to their communities or some notions of wanting to change, there is a socializing that happens where I feel that it's really difficult to get people who are really radical and really, really sort of going against current, like, the overriding paradigm. And so I just wanted to get some comments. That was one side of it. And the other side of it is this idea of, it is very exhausting to have to educate people about cultures and communities. But I guess I'm not playing devil's advocate, but something I've also thought about is, who do we want to leave that job of education to? And I think that is actually part of that tokenism question, which is, it isn't as effective maybe to hire one person, and then what does that mean? Do you get an entire army sort of invading an organization in order to really affect the change that is needed?
Just quickly, I want to say the word radical, to me, or being radical, I hear that a lot about me, and it just bugs me because to me it's like a very political term of actual people with weapons who are radical and have radicalized themselves with so many ways and are dangerous. So to me the word radical, when you're talking about openness and humanities and justice, it's not radical, that's humane. And the other idea about whose role is it? I mean, I have an open learning education platform, so obviously I'm taking the role seriously here. But to answer your question, when you hire just one person, either it's a person of color or like suddenly you have a CSR department, which is corporate social responsibility. You have one person in it, and that person has 0% or like 0.111% of the budget, of the global company's budget to make a change. This is the same kind of tokenization we're talking about. It's not the fact that you have you know, you don't need to be celebrated for hiring one person. You don't need to be celebrated for having a corporate social responsibility hire. You need to be celebrated when you hire a team and when you empower them with both financial you know, capacities and financial resources, and also human resources and team building efforts, and you actively change the company culture from within. Then you're celebrated, then you can come speak on the panel, and we are going to give you an award. But we can't just clap at like one hire, you know what I mean? There's so much work to be done in such a short time. According to the UN report on environmental justice and environmental you know, rights, we have less than 10 years. So what are we doing? Let's do it. Let's do it together. I don't know if that answers your question, or if you would like to.
Well, I think like when you talk about tokenization and diversity within institutions, to me it's all tokenization. When anyone, like for example, we're talking about governance, when you put a person of color in a position of government, they're still operating under the same system. So what we have to do is go into these institutions and not only diversify like the people who are in those institutions, but the structures of how the institutions were made also have to be diversified by people who are marginalized and coming in to said communities or government in order for it to truly thrive. Because you can put a person of color in office and they're still going to be operating and hurting our communities in the same way that they are now.
Questions? Yes? No? Another one?
Thank you so much.
Can you stand up so we see you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Good.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for this conversation, because to the panelists, to you, Celine, because I think that one of the things that people might sometimes struggle with is the why. Why is it important? Why are we talking about this in this forum? And I think that ignoring, so we know about the statistics. Sorry if this sounds like a diatribe and a comment, I'll get to the question. We know about the statistics about how the tiniest minority of the world is systematically despoiling the majority, and the poor getting poorer, the ecocide that is affecting the majority of the planet, which is going to be black and brown and yellow in future years. We're looking at the vast majority of people who are affected by sustainability negative in the immediate term, being people who are considered minorities in Western Europe and the US. So the reason this is important is because it's a justice issue, and the reason it's important is because sustainability is not a word that I particularly like because everyone's jumping on the bandwagon, because we can't sustain a trajectory which is nothing other than going towards destruction. My question is, how do we, in 5 years, create a culture of empathy that enables, and empathy is a very hard thing to automate because it's somehow self-interested to be able to say, I don't want my children to boil because of global warming, but it's harder to empathize with the man who is already boiling in Sudan, has no way of feeding his family, or the woman who has no way of feeding her family today. And so I call everyone to understand that this is a question, or this is an issue which can become very personalized, and so you don't necessarily see the bigger picture. But the reason it is important to have the representatives of the majority of the people who are suffering and marginalized through sustainability at the table of governance, of the discussion of sustainability, is because without that, the power shift will never happen. The poor will get poorer, the environment will get despoiled faster, and those who are criminally liable for it will actually get away with it and become richer in the process.
Thank you so much. Well, they won't be able to eat their money because there will be no food left, but thank you for your question. I think the question is, how do we, in the next 5 years, create a culture of empathy? And I think the goal of this symposium is for us to leave with key questions that we would like to remember, to think on. We're not here to say, oh, we have all the answers. In fact, we have all the questions. We have all the questions to all of you watching live or not, or being here in this room. Thank you. We want to make sure that we leave with enough questions because it is a work in progress. We are not anywhere close, and we want to make sure, as anyone working in any field, to make sure we are asking the right question. And I think this is a brilliant, brilliant question. How do we, in the next 5 years, create a culture of empathy?
I would say start with your social media. If everyone that you follow looks like you and is at your same level of privilege, then you're not learning anything there. You're just continuing this cycle. And so I would start with the old social media scroll and go through and maybe think about unfollowing some of those people that don't make you feel that great about yourself, because comparison is the thief of joy. And instead look into maybe following some people that will diversify your thoughts and teach you a little bit about a level of privilege that you don't understand because you've never seen it before.
I feel like that's the question about influencers. That I kind of wanted to put it in there because the word influencers make me like cringe.
I know, me too.
Because what are they influencing you to do? What are they influencing you to do?
Consume.
To buy, to purchase. They're influencing you to feel less than. They're influencing you to feel incomplete and only complete when you have purchased the latest gadget or the latest cool thing or the latest glossy thing and so on and so forth. So any influencer that is influencing you to purchase, think again if that's what feeds your soul. That's what creates a culture of empathy that is leading you towards sustainability closer and closer. And I think that in the next 5 years, we're going to see a major shift in influencers. And I think the influencers that are actually feeding your soul are going to rise, and they're already rising. And
I've already seen it. I mean, Rachel Cargill in the US, she had a few thousand followers when I met her. She's huge now. It's already happening, but you keep the momentum going by continuing this conversation and continuing to look at who you're surrounding yourself with in those social media spaces. And
diversifying the voices. I
Yeah.
think that is something that we are very interested in looking into. Last question, perhaps, yeah? All the way in the back, please stand up. All the way in the back, please stand up. No? But this was a good song.
First, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for the questions as well. They were great so far. My question is like, is we are talking about sustainability. We are talking about huge problems. We talk about climate change, extinctions. People don't really know what we are talking about. People don't have the knowledge and the power to change things. So they look like really big things, but maybe everyone can make a change every day with just 3 small actions. So Sophia, you were saying actions are louder than words, but what we have to do every day. Like all of you have to list 3 things every day you do in order to change and maybe to make a better future, what you would say.
Can I take a quick pass at this? So this year I had the privilege to interview someone called Sadhguru. Do you know who Sadhguru is? Yeah, he's a guru. But Sadhguru says something really powerful. 2 things he told me when I met him in person. One is that what kind of proof do you have that you are not already in heaven and making a terrible mess out of it? That was his first thing he told me. And his second thing he told me that really stuck to me is that today, the people who are motivated and driven are the ones who are destroying the planet. He's like, but the people who are lazy are the ones who are preserving the planet. So when we talk about doing, it's important to talk about what's driving this action. Is it consciousness? Is it, this idea of empathy? Or what is it feeling, what kind of void are you trying to fill in order to create said action? And I find this so provocative that the lazy people on this world are saving the planet. And at first I was like, but I'm doing all that I can. But I flew here to do this, and we're like drinking from a water bottle. And if I did want to do an impact in sustainability, perhaps would be to just like meditate, would be more sustainable than doing this whole big production. But it is, when we talk about sustainability and we talk about action, there is a big conflict in it. Some people call it hypocrisy or hypocrite. I don't like this word because who are you to judge and who is judging and who is saying it's hypocrite or is good or bad or who is saying that? And I feel that every action must come from this idea of what's driving my action, why am I doing this, who am I trying to impress, and what am I actually trying to achieve? I don't have the quite answer, but sometimes really doing nothing is best.
I do judge people that have power and money. I do. And I do call out hypocrisy there because I feel like nothing changes if we don't. Mm-hmm. So it's not like I said, there's intersections to this conversation. So you don't call out someone who has less privilege than you do. That's not something you ever do. But for a brand that says, oh, we're so sustainable, this and that, and then they're not really practicing sustainability and they're working with people that aren't sustainable, I don't know. I think that's worth calling attention to. Mm-hmm. I really do. For me personally, I've changed my own buying habits. Everything I'm wearing today is used except for my boots, which happen to have been purchased from a fast fashion company about 5 years ago, but I really love them. And the point is, we all have fast fashion in our wardrobe. It's not going to happen overnight where we're all, and that would be incredibly wasteful if you just were like, I'm just going to get rid of everything. I can't do this. No, but to slow down and to really think about your purchases, that's a really small step to wear your items. If you pick up something and you know you're not going to wear it more than 40 times, leave it in the store. That's a waste. And, brands will take notice of that change in the numbers because nothing gets produced as supply if there's no demand for it. They're not going to do it. So small habits to change is to look at your own buying habits.
Do we have time for a last question? One last question. Oh, over here, Rachel. Colin in the front.
It's coming.
Okay, I have to tell the truth. It's not a question.
Stand up, please, lady.
Hey, everybody. It's not a question. Sorry, Celine. So I only started studying sustainability like a year ago. And it opened Pandora's box for me, and I couldn't go back. I just want to say something, because the whole time I've been sitting here listening, I feel like there's a conflation that's happening right now. And I just have to say this thing. This is not a complex concept. we're making way too many things. This is not a racial thing. This is a humanitarian. I mean, I understand everyone's plight, but like just to simplify things, this is not black, white, Asian. This is a human thing that every single person needs to, I'm like shaking right now because, no, I'm serious, because the numbers are staggering. It is terrifying. It's not complicated. We're making a lot of stuff. We're overproducing things. We're ruining the planet. We don't need to be shopping as much. Like when someone asked, like, what can we do? And your answer I thought was great, which is like, consider your own buying habits. Like that's number one. At its core, from my understanding, sustainability and commerce are like at odds, period. Sustainability really, in truth, is gonna mean just going slower, shopping less. So like the point that you're saying about like hypocrisy, I think it is worth calling out because like a company like Everlane and some of these big brands that have a lot of funding and have really loud voices, and H&M, they're very problematic because there's a huge hypocrisy there. It's like they're saying that they're sustainable, but they're not. So it is worth mentioning, but I think we're living in this time of like call out culture and the, you know, oppression Olympics, and I'm this and you're not, and I'm gay and you're not, and I'm black and you're not, and I'm privileged. It's like, I get it, but it's very distracting from something that's like really not that complicated. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's really not that complicated. So we just have to be very, very, I just want to kind of center that because I think we're kind of diving into a lot of other things and they're all worth talking about and we're going to talk about them all day. But like on the topic of sustainability, we're killing the planet, we're making way too many things, and there's so many different ways that we can do our part. It's not like it's one thing. There's not one answer. Also, when you're saying we're all asking questions, there's little things like I don't buy plastic bags anymore. New York has made a mandate. I mean, it's getting to a point where like the government's going to make certain mandates because it's that bad. It's not about rich, poor. I mean, obviously those things all play a factor and overproducing and trying to make money. This is just something I started a year ago. Like I didn't know anything about this. I didn't care. It was in a blind spot. It's like the thing that you were saying about, you know, your vegan shampoo and these things that like distract you. I was like that person.
Gluten-free shampoo.
Yeah, gluten-free shampoo. Like I was in this place where like I didn't know about it, I didn't care, I didn't get it. No one talked to me in a way where it ever made sense, didn't have any interest in it. Then I learned, this woman from a professor at a school in Ohio reached out to me and was like, I want to teach you about this thing. And again, like I said, Pandora's box was open, and when I actually learned some of it's difficult to grasp if you haven't seen it, if you haven't, some of these places in China where, you know, when you actually see like the effects of it, it's hard to imagine. Just like so many other things, like you don't see it, you can't understand it. And I just wanted to say that really quickly because that's all.